Hey, listen to me, come here. Let's talk about why PlayStation has changed for the worst. I don't know about you, but over the last few years, it feels like the PlayStation brand isn't the same one that I personally grew up with. Now, like myself, it may just be that you've put it down to being a little bit naive and that times are changing and we're all a little bit older now. So, of course, the brand is going to feel completely different now than it did 30 years ago. But no, the PlayStation brand is basically a completely different brand now to what it used to be, if you understand what I'm saying. And here's why. When I hear the name PlayStation, to me personally, and I'm sure this is probably the same for you as well, but it conjures up images of sleek, cutting-edge Japanese products. They're the Japanese brand that in the 90s surpassed their Japanese competition in the forms of Sega and Nintendo, which is something that I've covered on this channel many times in the past. This is in part because they managed to present themselves in a way that was much cooler than all of the competition. This was done in several ways. So for example, they marketed towards adults rather than children. They were incredibly hands-off with censorship. They placed consoles in nightclubs across the UK. So there was 52 in total, and the most significant of those was the Ministry of Sound. They tied the PlayStation brand with drugs and rave culture and house music. They went all in to appear rebellious and represent the counterculture. So why is it that they are so different now? Well, you might think it's because we live in a social media driven world and that consumer tastes are completely different to how they were prior to that. But there's actually a much more concrete reason for why the PlayStation brand feels so very different now, and why it has done so in particular since 2016. What happened in 2016? Well, Sony ended up moving the PlayStation brand, which was headquartered in Tokyo, Japan, over to California instead. Since being there, they now have very different ideas of how the PlayStation brand should be portrayed. A quick visit over to the PlayStation website highlights to us how disturbingly different they want us to view the PlayStation now in comparison to how they, convinced us to buy it in the past, back when it was being marketed as being very cool. What is it that I mean by this? Well, let me read to you the opening line from the section on their website called Our Values. As well as creating incredible gaming experiences, SIE, as in Sony Interactive Entertainment, is committed to building inclusive communities for our players and staff, as well as recognising the part we can play in reducing our product's environmental impact. So let's break this down a little bit. They want to deliver incredible gaming experiences, which is great. Well, that's their job. But they're putting the same level of emphasis on what they call building inclusive communities and wanting to reduce their environmental impact. Sorry, but as much as some people will feel that the last 2 points are important, the PlayStation brand should be about creating a good game console, not placing identity politics and environmentalism on the same pedestal as creating a good game console. At the end of the day, identity politics and environmentalism shouldn't be the primary focus of PlayStation. Gaming should be their primary focus. Giving us a good console experience should be their primary focus. It's alarming that they're putting that much emphasis onto those particular aspects, yet zero inclusion of core values which most reasonable people would expect for a consumer-friendly product. Bearing in mind that most people have a distrust of corporate activism as it is, the prioritisation of these concerns is, well, concerning. They feel the need to include those particular things, but they don't mention stuff like providing good customer service, value for money, innovating technologies, or content diversity. And I mean that as in like genres and styles, not personal identities and bedroom habits. I think one of the things that particularly bothers me about this is that there's no corporate neutrality here. They've plainly and obviously taken a side and made gaming feel partisan when there is zero need for gaming to be partisan in any way, shape or form. PlayStation should have remained apolitical, but it's become very clear to me now that it's been infected by its location. It seems to be rampant with these California university-based ideologies. And there's just no need for it. There is no need for it. And for the record, personally, for me, I don't give a hoot what people's political leanings are. I'm centrist myself. I've got friends who are very left-leaning. I've got friends who lean to the right. I'm not a fan of extremism in any way, shape or form. I just like people to be nice and sensible and base ideas in logic rather than all of these fluffy feelings that they might have. I do not like the idea of mega corporations forcing their politics down my throat through their brands and products. It leaves a very, very bad taste in my mouth. And you might think that I'm overreacting a little bit here, but after I read the next section to you, I think you'll start to understand why I feel the way I feel. Because although some of it is all right, some of it is virtue signalling upon virtue signalling upon virtue signalling. So let's dig in. So their environmental section, pretty standard, right? Basically, it's not enough for them to want to reduce all of their environmental impacts themselves, which is fair enough. That's something that they should be looking into, and they should be doing that. But they're condescendingly passing the buck onto us as the consumer. So I'm not a fan of big corporations passing on their social responsibilities onto us, the consumer. That's not right, in my opinion. Like, they're the corporations, they're the ones creating it. They're the ones who need to be dealing with it accordingly. Am I right, or do you disagree with me on that? I'm not sure. What do you think? Tell me. They've pledged to use your money to create VR applications to raise awareness about climate change, because that sounds just so fun, doesn't it? Like, what a laugh. It says that they are striving to reduce their environmental impact to zero by 2050 throughout the cycle of their products and business activities, which it sounds pretty all right if they can do that. I feel like a lot of companies say stuff like this and then go back on them personally, but that's just my opinion. It also mentions that they want people to start recycling their consoles themselves that they've worked hard to pay for rather than keep them. And the rest is mostly about sort of energy saving, reducing plastic cups and so on in the workplace, and other statements to try to get merit points. I mean, because apparently you can only have plastic cups in the workplace. There's no such thing as people having their own mug. Like, crazy, huh? But to give the devil their due, I did find one point that was genuinely consumer friendly, in my opinion. A commitment to providing out of warranty repair services and providing user information to help maintain consoles. So at least there's one element that feels beneficial to the PlayStation owners in amongst all of this. Online safety, account security and privacy. There's not really much to complain about here. It's like parental controls, account security. Hopefully they'll stop leaking our data eventually. The next is accessibility. Again, this bit is fine. In fact, it's not just fine. I think it's great. The accessibility controller, in my opinion, I think is fantastic. I've got a cousin who would, if they don't already own this, I think it's highly likely that they probably already do own this, but if they don't, that would certainly be something that I'd be like telling him to go and get his hands on, because it'd just make his gaming experience a lot more comfortable for him than using a standard controller. Okay, so here is the juicy bit that you've all been waiting for: diversity, equity and inclusivity. And I just know it that you in particular love it when a soulless corporation shovels DEI down your throat like the good little consumer bitch that you are. So here is their statement about their employee networks, or ENETs, and what they're for. Our PlayStation employee networks, ENETs, bring together employees and allies who represent unique experiences, perspectives and ideas. These networks aim to create a sense of belonging for members, promote cultural awareness, amplify the voices of the community and advise our business. ENET expertise is utilised in areas such as diversity recruiting and product development, and our ENETs further our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging in the communities where we work and live. I do not like the term diversity recruitment. And the reason for this is because I've had a couple of occasions in the past where I've been hired for a job and I have not at the time been sure whether I was hired to tick a box or because I was actually genuinely a good fit for the job role. Believe it or not, rather than making me feel empowered, being in that kind of situation for myself actually had a negative impact on my self-esteem as an employee, because it was kind of like, I don't know, like, oh, thank you so much for hiring me because of the colour of my skin and my gender, rather than actually because I'm the best possible person for that job. Like, it literally messes with your head. I think that Sarah Bond is a really good example of why DEI is a massive problem at the moment. And it's not because she herself is a problem, it's more along the lines of corporate DEI incentives are a big problem, especially the way that Xbox at the moment seems to be screwing up quite a lot. I think a lot of people are now looking at her being the president and assuming that she's just a diversity hire and a girl boss, rather than her legitimately being the best person possible for that job position, which they wouldn't even be thinking about if people weren't so hyper aware of corporate DEI. Now she's got a load of extra problems and pressures on her that she wouldn't necessarily have if this wasn't being shoveled down our throats all the time. I think one of the reasons why I'm so against DEI is because of my upbringing. Like, both of my dad and my granddad are both significantly darker than I am. My granddad was a Hindu Tamil who came to England as an immigrant in the 1960s. And then my dad as well, he was a young man throughout the 80s and 90s, and he's done really well in his respective career. They're both very much believers. Well, my granddad's passed now, but certainly my dad still is a believer in meritocracy rather than being given advantages due to the colour of your skin or your gender or whatever your particular quirk is. Oh, I've got a picture of my granddad here as well. My granddad came to England in the 1960s. He had a heavy accent. He was very, very dark skinned. In fact, I've got a picture here of my granddad in the 60s. So in the 1960s, you have to think it was a completely different era, completely different time period. He would have had the odds stacked against him. But because of meritocracy, he knew that to be able to get a job that he wanted over other people, the best thing to do was to be more qualified. My granddad ended up being a engineer in the computer rooms for the BBC back when they were in Harrods in the 1960s. So that was my granddad, worked there. Like, that's a pretty awesome job for an immigrant man to have. But he got that job because he was the most qualified person for that job. Like, same thing with my dad. My dad's like done all right for himself in his lifetime. He's done that through making sure that he was the best at what he did. I feel like for myself, like, I've been very much brought up essentially with like the JFD School of Management, as in the just do it School of Management. Like, don't bitch and moan and find excuses, just be the best. Go out there, just bloody do it, get on with it, don't moan, just do it. Me being a girl, not an excuse. Me being non-white person it's not an excuse. So because I've been brought up to believe that so vehemently, on the occasions where I did think I might have been a diversity hire, that's kind of, in a way, why it messed with my head. And then when I was working at those jobs, I made damned sure that I was the best in my position over everyone else. I made sure, because I do not want to be seen as being a victim. I want to be seen as being the best. So for me personally, in my lived experience, DEI, I feel, spits in the face of everything that I've been brought up to believe, which is essentially, to be the best, you need to be the best. That's it. No excuses, no bitching, just get on with it. PlayStation considers you lesser in certain ways for certain characteristics that you might have, and therefore has deemed you as worthy of coddling. Some of these are ridiculous. They range from simply being black to LGBTQIA+, which is their long acronym, not mine, and even simply being a woman. Some of the policies that they've put in place I actually think are all right, and I don't have a problem with them, but some of them I just think are utterly ridiculous, like those ones that I just mentioned. They're being perceived as being barriers by PlayStation, but why? Like, that seems more problematic to me, that they're being considered being barriers. Like, It doesn't make sense. But anyway, they've bought into this and they're promoting what is often referred to as cultural Marxism. So for those who don't know much about this nonsense, Marxism is a socioeconomic theory developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It focuses on the role of class struggle in societal change. It emphasises historical materialism, where economic factors drive historical progress, and highlights a conflict between the bourgeoisie, capitalist class, and the proletariat, working class. Marxism posits that capitalism exploits labour, leading to worker alienation, and predicts an inevitable proletarian revolution that will establish a classless, communist society. In a nutshell, they view life through the lens of an unresolvable struggle between the worker class and the owner class due to their conflicting interests. What's cultural Marxism then? Cultural Marxism extends traditional Marxist analysis to cultural and social dimensions, examining how cultural institutions perpetuate capitalist ideology and maintain power structures. This approach explores the concept of cultural control, where dominant cultural norms set by the ruling class shape societal beliefs. It also considers the role of ideology in controlling the proletariat and sustaining the status quo. The modern identity politics movement expands on this by adding intersectionality. This is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. Intersectionality examines how various forms of social stratification such as race, gender and class intersect and create unique experiences of oppression. When combined with cultural Marxism, intersectionality broadens the analysis of power and inequality, acknowledging that multiple overlapping systems of oppression, including patriarchy, white supremacy and capitalism, interact to shape individual and group experiences. PlayStation and other corporate companies, particularly many based in California, believe this integrated approach promotes more inclusive and comprehensive social justice movements that address the complexities of modern social inequalities. This whole way of thinking is beyond ridiculous, as viewing the world through a lens of a place where only one type of human being can be considered optimal is sick. Straight white males do not have an inherent advantage over myself, nor anyone else for that matter, and the fact that some progressives believe this is, in my opinion, disgusting. It's an incredibly racist, sexist and prejudiced lens to look at things through. Essentially, the fact that large corporate companies would look at us like that and enact these cultural Marxist ideals is absolutely mental and spits in the face of meritocracy and other proven and tested methods and mechanisms that make capitalism work. They're perpetuating the idea that they care about inclusion, but what they're really doing is they're just enacting the local political beliefs of their local area. The long and short of it is that PlayStation only really started heavily investing in social justice after 2020, when it was trendy to do so. And now basically they're coming across as completely disingenuous, because the reality is they will never ever really care more about this than they do their profits. They're alienating half of their consumer base in doing all of this. So with many people speculating that there is a video game crash on the horizon, I feel that their behaviour at the moment is more than just a little contributory factor towards this potentially happening. And I, for one, personally find it very insulting to be considered a diversity statistic. So that, in my opinion, is why the PlayStation brand is no longer cool. Thank you so much for sticking around to this point in the video, and if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe now. And if you fancy having a nice discount on a brand new game, you can get up to 90% off with my Instant Gaming affiliate link in the description. Thank you so much, and see you in the next one.